and welcome to Deals with Heels, where female entrepreneurs thrive, where we talk about all things entrepreneur, marketing, sales, mindset, and personal growth. I'm Debra, your host. Welcome to the show. I'm so excited about our guest today. I have some stuff in common with her, and I cannot wait to talk to her about it. Her name is Dominiece Clifton, and she is a fire starter on a mission to ignite a spark in 1,000 women entrepreneurs. As a clarity coach, business strategist, and founder of Transformation University, she empowers women entrepreneurs to find clarity so they build their confidence and a successful business. Also, the founder of Move and Still, she supports organizations by offering stress reduction and mindfulness services to increase well-being. Please welcome Dominiece to Deals with Heels.
Debra, thank you so much for having me today.
I am so excited to talk to you. And I think the first thing that I noticed was your story about when you started your transformation, about how you, let me see how I worded it, how you started your spiritual journey.
Yeah.
Because I started mine in a really similar way.
Okay.
And so I want you to tell everyone about yours, and then we can get into and compare the differences with mine too.
Yeah, that sounds good. I will go a little bit farther back just for context.
Okay.
When I was pregnant with my oldest daughter, who's now 8, I started feeling called to meditate. It was like the creating life in my womb. I was feeling more connected. And so that's, I would say, really when my meditation journey began. That was in 2016. I was very inconsistent though with everything, meditation, mindfulness, my health journey, my wellness journey. Like I was always inconsistent. And I, was on and off with my relationship with my spiritual journey, personal development journey for about 4 years. And then in 2020, right around the time that COVID was getting started and, it was kind of going around the world and we were just starting to hear about it, I found myself at a really low place. I was unemployed because I just quit my jobs a few months before in December of 2019. And originally when I quit my job, I didn't have a plan, but my plan was, I'll take an extended maternity leave for 6 months and then I'll go back to work. So that's what I was planning on doing. And 3 months into that plan, COVID came and just knocked that right off because I was just like, well, now it's not an ideal time to be entering the workforce. So I had a newborn, I had a 3-year-old toddler. And if anyone has children, you know how fun that age is. And I had a marriage that was falling apart. We have since, filed for divorce and gone through that process. But in 2020, things were really challenging for us. And so I was at a low point. Like I didn't know what to do. I'm someone who always is trying to strategize and figure things out, but I could see no way out of that situation. And so I did the only thing that I knew how to do. And I just started to be still. I started meditating. I started praying. And I was hoping that God would throw me a lifeline. Like that was where I was. I'm just like, please just give me something to get out of this. And then one day, a few weeks into doing that, I got a download that said every day for the next 90 days, focus on your mind, your body, and your spirit. And so I started doing that consistently. And gratefully, because of COVID, we were all in quarantine. And so I had lots of time. So I don't think it's a coincidence that I got that download in the midst of this thing, this major life change that was happening for everyone, because it gave me an easy opportunity to be still. Had that download come to me 6 months prior when I was still working, I probably would not have been able to do it, but I had nothing but time. And so I started being very mindful about what I was consuming. I started listening to podcasts like this and taking in instructional content and unlearning things and learning about neuroscience. I went really deep on the mindset piece and I did that daily. I started moving my body every day with physical activity. And that was beautiful because it was just a stress reliever. I'd always struggle with my weight. It helped me to lose the weight and actually keep it off. And spiritually, I just became clear about my purpose. When I came out of that 90-day period, physically, I'd lost about 15 pounds, right? So people could see that. But the transformation was really in how I felt. And I always say that it felt like I had come out of a cloud of fog that I didn't even know I was existing in. And I was just more clear, right, about who I was, what my purpose was. And that was really the deepening of my spiritual practice, but also the start of my entrepreneurial journey. Because the last thing I'll say here is that as a result of that 90-day challenge, I came out of that feeling so alive and I wanted everyone to feel that way. And that was really why I started coaching, because I was like, everyone needs to know, right, like that we can do this and we're able to do this. And so that was 5 years ago, and here we are now.
So tell me how your grandma was involved.
Oh, yes. So in 2017, so about a year after I started meditating, I was, again, super inconsistent, but I was in this space where I think we all get to these points of you feel like there's more, right? And you're asking yourself, is this it? But you're not really sure what the more is, but you can feel your soul saying like, there's more to this. I was in that space in 2017, and I was working a job that wasn't fulfilling. And, I made up all the excuses about why I needed to stay there. And so, again, another low point in my life at the end of 2017, I was meditating, and my grandmother came to me in a meditation, and she passed away 7 years before at that time. So she's an ancestor, and she never visited me in that, that 7 year time frame. And she essentially came to me in a meditation. It was almost like a conversation like this. I could see and hear her so clearly. We talked about my marriage. We talked about the kids. I was, all of these things. And she essentially, I always joke, she summons me is what I say, because she reminded me that I had work to do, right? Like, you have an assignment. There was something that your soul came here to do. And now it's time to get started on that thing. And so that experience with my grandmother was actually the start of me deepening my personal development and self-growth journey. So that's when I started taking that more seriously and really trying to work on myself. I wasn't interested in entrepreneurship at that time, but I was very much so interested in becoming a better version of myself. And my grandmother's definitely was the catalyst, like her coming to me and telling me, right, get started, you got some work to do, was the catalyst of all of that.
So weird how closely your story aligns with mine in different ways. But so I really wanted to meditate. I had this feeling, like you said, there's more. This has been close to 15 years ago. And so I really wanted to. And my husband at the time, he had a meditation chamber and he had incense and he did this whole thing. And I was super interested in trying it. And so I did it. Every time I tried it, I felt really nauseated. And I couldn't figure out why I couldn't do it. Yeah. And I took my son with me. He was super into crystals and books and auras. And so he's 26 now and almost 27. But at the time, he was probably 13 or 14. And so we went to a spirit fair that they have here periodically. I think she travels. The lady that puts it on, I know pretty well, or I used to. Her name is Cindy, and she is a psychic medium. She helps the police find missing people. She's the real deal.
Oh, wow.
And so she has this spirit fair, and you can go, and there's tarot card readers, and sometimes there's mediums there, and you can have Reiki healing and buy books and, the whole spirit fair. Oh, yeah. It's a fantastic, fantastic place. And so Luke and I went, and we're wandering around, and he wanted to have his palm read, and there were no palm readers there, but we were walking through, and if they didn't have tarot cards on their table, then we would ask them. And so we came upon this gentleman, and anyway, he was a psychic medium. He did a reading for my son, and he did a reading for me, and my grandma came through. So my last grandparent passed away in 1985. When I was 18, I was really close to my grandma Lola, my mom's mom. And so I've always had a very close kind of spiritual relationship with her. We have a thing with roses. And anyway, my grandma came through, and this gentleman's name that was doing the reading, named Drew, he says, okay, I have to tell you something before you go. I have to give you this message from your grandma. And I said, okay. And he gets this piece of paper. He's right. He wrote it down. And he was like, your grandma is making me write this down. And it was, number one, to meditate every morning, meditate every day. And number two was to say a prayer of gratitude every night. And number three was to have a little fun in between, which is so my grandma. And then he said, this is my meditation CD called The Pearl that I'm selling. And I'm giving it to you for free because your grandma's making me. And
I like her.
I know, right? I was like, grandma. And I wouldn't say I was super skeptical, but I wouldn't give him additional information, right? I would reply, yeah, there is. Like he said, there's something special about roses. And I don't know what it is. And it's like, yeah, there is. And then later I'll have like my thing were pink roses and my grandma's thing were red roses. And so on my pink rose bush, like the light pink, holding a red one will bloom.
Oh, wow.
And it's a message from my grandma.
Yeah.
And when she died, a white rose bloomed on her red bush. It's a thing. My whole life I've had this with my grandma. So I didn't tell him, but then it happened. And so I took a picture of it and I emailed it to him and he put it in his book. But so when I read your story about your grandma, I was just like, wow, that is such because I did the same thing and I gave up. I didn't use the meditation chamber and all the things that my now ex-husband was using. And it turns out that I don't need that to get into a meditative state. And I was like diving into the ocean, but I couldn't swim yet. And it was overwhelming and making me nauseated. Wow. But I would just get up in the morning and pop that CD in my laptop with some headphones and meditate every morning. And that was the real step into meditation for me. My true transformation didn't start until 2020, same as you.
Oh, wow. Okay. Wow.
Got divorced. My marriage split up and my nest was empty. I raised 5 kids and they were out of the nest. And then in 2021, my mother passed away. And so that was it for me. But I'm a very similar kind of journey as you and I. So I wanted to talk about that. So open if you're somebody that's listening and, you think that Dominiece and I are a bunch of kooks, then I just encourage you, of course, spend time sitting alone. And whether it's God, the universe, or your ancestors, the messages will come. Yeah. They just do. So I talk a lot about sitting alone.
Yeah. I'm such an advocate of stillness and alone time because, I mentioned that I started that 90-day practice. What I didn't share was that I kept doing that after the 90 days because I felt so good. And so 5 years later, next month, I'm still doing that practice. Now, of course, we're human. So there's days where I don't do, one of the 3. But in general, like I've been consistent there. And I think such a huge piece of me knowing myself now has been sitting with myself consistently. So sometimes that's meditation, but sometimes that's just going for a walk and sitting in nature, right? Without my phone and all of the distractions and allowing myself to receive. Sometimes that's listening to music and just allowing myself to be present. And so I would want to say to people that are listening that meditation can be an act of, it can be an act. It doesn't have to be, if you find that sitting on a cushion or sitting, quietly is hard for you, you can use an app, but you can also go for a walk or you can also do something that puts you in that meditative state without sitting on a cushion. I have a friend who's a cyclist and we were talking and I asked him, like, when do you feel the most connected to God, or your higher power? And he said, I get my best ideas and I feel the most connected when I'm riding my bike. So he goes, rides 30, 40 miles. And that's when he's like in his meditative state. And so it could look different for each of us, but it is important to make sure that you consistently give yourself time to connect and get the guidance.
100%. There's a lot of techniques out there that involve walking and like it'll start with what you're listening to and then maybe what you see as you go through. They have different steps and I've never done that because I just like to be in my thoughts, but I think that could be really valuable. And I definitely love being in nature. It is just a real connection. One of the things that I thought about when I read your stuff that really spoke to me was this whole idea of the confusion loop of trial and error. Yeah. So I think as entrepreneurs, and I definitely want to understand what you mean by that, but we're so pivot, sometimes feels like trial and error when you come upon an obstacle and you just pivot out of it, but it's not the same thing.
Yeah. I'll share. So this came to me in a download. I feel like most of my best ideas come to me in meditation, and this was one of those things.
Well, and me, it's if I'm doing something that is routine, driving, taking a shower. That's why, like, if you can't remember something, do your times tables or sing the ABC song in your head and get that working. And then you're conscious, it'll just happen. You'll just remember it. But I get a lot of my creativity that way.
Yeah. I love that. So I was meditating one day and this started to come to me and made sense of pretty much the last 5 years of my entrepreneurial journey and why I had to go through all the things that I've gone through. So the confusion loop, the entrepreneurial confusion loop, is a cycle that entrepreneurs find themselves in when we don't have a clear understanding of who we are first, right? Because that matters in our business. We don't have a clear understanding of who we are, who we serve, and what our clients need. And when we are in that state of confusion, we have certain mindsets, certain patterns, certain habits that we typically repeat over and over. And those become what I've called the 13 different entrepreneurial archetypes. And so if you are stuck and you're unclear, you have a lack of clarity, there's a lot of ways that can manifest in your business. It impacts us, right? It impacts us. It leaves us feeling scattered. It leaves us feeling frustrated. We don't see the success that we want to see. And so the big message is that before we start to create products and think about services and what we want to offer, we have to be extremely clear on, again, those things, who we are, who we want to serve, and what they need. And the challenge is that most people jump right in. Like if you look at most coaching programs, they jump right into creating offers and, they didn't validate their offer. They're not talking to clients. They didn't do any work on themselves. And so they get into things that don't feel in alignment with them. And that leaves you in that confusion loop. And what happens is, again, there's 13 different archetypes, and each of these archetypes show how the confusion loop manifests, but the root cause is the same, right? The root cause is a lack of clarity. And so really it's about going back to the beginning and making sure that you're really clear before you start with serving your clients and creating a strategy. And that's why when I introduce myself, I say I'm a clarity coach and a business strategist, because first we start with clarity and I really guide my clients through that piece. And then we take that and we create the business strategy. I'll read the 13 archetypes. I won't talk about all of them, but as you are just listening to the names of them, and even for the folks that are listening, see if just by hearing the names, like you resonate with any of these, right? And then I'll talk about maybe two of the most common that I see with women that I support. So there's the overconsumer. There's the pollinator, like a bee in the springtime. There's the overthinker, right? Which many of us struggle with. The copycat creator, the solo warrior, the procrastinating perfectionist, which is a big one for most people, the visionary dreamer, the discount diva, or if it's a guy, it's a discount dude. You have the fearful avoider, the masker, the giver, the serial entrepreneur, and the last one is the reluctant dreamer.
I think I could put a face on almost all of those. And it's so true for marketing because there's a lot out there, right? Mm-hmm. There's all kinds. And I think people think about tactics when they think about marketing or platforms. So they think about content or Facebook or Google or email or direct mail. That's what they think about instead of, and those are the trees in the forest, not the forest. Yeah. And so the clarity in your sales mind and your marketing mind is, what are my products? What are the pain points that I'm fixing for these people? How am I going to communicate that with those pain, and really get back to the beginning again. If you feel like you're out there and think you're doing all the things, you've hired a content creator, you're on social media and you're doing all the things that you've been told to do and it's not working. I always say you have to go back to the beginning because likely you're using the wrong message with the wrong offer to attract your client on the wrong platform. Exactly. It's all of that from the beginning. So it makes sense that you would need to do that with your own business to find all of those things out about yourself. So that makes perfect sense. And it ties in really, really well. Yeah. And I saw myself in like 4 of those too, by the way.
Here's the thing that's ironic about 13 different archetypes. Literally, as these downloads were coming to me and I was like putting together, all the different types, just thinking about my own experience and conversations that I have with other women entrepreneurs and my clients, I first said, oh my God, now the last 4.5 years of my life make so much sense. I literally have gone through each of these archetypes and I realized that the universe allowed that to be a part of my journey so that 1, I could talk about it, but 2, I could empathize and relate to other women. And so when I'm having conversations, my clarity calls with women and they're telling me what they're going through, I'm like, oh, she's stuck in the overconsumer phase. The overconsumer is one of the most popular. That's the person that hoards information. They don't trust themselves. They don't feel like they're ready enough to do the thing. They feel like they need external validation. And so they're reading all the books and listening to all the podcasts and, going to all the online courses and network, like they're just a wet sponge that's soaking up information, but there's no implementation of what's happening. It's constantly, I'm not ready. I'm not enough. I don't know enough. I don't feel like the expert. So let me just keep taking in information, and they get stuck in that space. And I was stuck in that space. And not only does it cost you time, but it also costs you a lot of money, right? If you're someone like me who kept jumping in coaching programs and hoping that someone would give me the answer, I've spent over $60,000 at this point on various coaching programs.
Wow.
And it was because I didn't have clarity. And what happens is when you jump into most programs, they assume that you have that foundational knowledge. They assume, yeah, you know your ideal client. So they're just going with, here's your social media tactics and strategies. Here's how you create your online course. And here's where you upload it, Kajabi or all these other places. They don't sit with you most of the time on the clarity piece. And then people jump right in and do all of these things. They start paying for ads and all of this stuff that's super expensive. And like you said, they don't get the results that they want because you're not talking to anyone in particular. You're definitely not talking to the person that you're desiring to talk to. And so having conversations with people that you are seeking to serve, right? That discovery process is so important because you begin to hear firsthand from the people that you want to work with what their needs are. And then when you create something, you know that you're creating from a space of there's a need there. And then the second thing is proof of concept, right? We put things together and we think that it's a good idea. It's like, I have this really cool thing in my head. I want to create this online course or start this brand, but we haven't validated that anyone wants this thing. And so again, you put it out and now it's crickets and you're thinking there's something wrong with you, or you're feeling frustrated because you wasted and invested so much time and effort into something, but you never validated if people wanted that before you started to create it. And so those two, getting clarity, having discovery calls, talking to, ideal clients, and then validating your proof, your proof of concept are extremely important at the start of the business, or if you're in a space where it's not working and you feel like you need to pivot, those things become really important.
Gosh, amen to that, right? I mean, she's talking about it kind of from a coaching point of view because that's what she does. She helps coaches, but also it's for any small business. When you think about it, so many times.
Oh, yeah.
Especially in my industry, when you're in advertising and marketing, it's so segmented, but with content creators and videographers and website developers and branding photographers and branding and digital marketing and social media, and to the business person, they all do the same thing. And they all expect that business owner to have all of that clarity.
Yeah.
And if they're not a strategist and they haven't hired a strategist or a coach to help them through it, they're expecting this videographer to help them build all of that, and they just don't have it. That's not what their expertise is. So if you're in that spot, whether you're a coach or a small business person, then you need that help with strategy. It's a really important step. And if you skipped it, because most people do, they just think, I'm just going to hire this content creator. And when you don't get the results, it's because you haven't gone back to the beginning, honestly. So
can I add something small here really quickly?
Please.
I love what you said about, like, if you started and you didn't get that, you have to go back, because what I've seen, this is definitely not just for the people that are getting started. This is for seasoned entrepreneurs. What usually happens is around the 5 or 7 year mark, you hit a plateau. You're stagnant. You want to grow. You can't figure out how to get your numbers up. You've been in the same place for a while. And the reason why you can't go to the next level is because in the beginning, you never have that clarity. And so we can kind of figure things out those first few years and make it work and, warm network and all referrals. But to scale the way that you want to scale to the multiple 6 and 7 figures, you have to have that level of clarity. And so even if you're 3, 5, 7 years in, sometimes I've supported clients that have been in business for 7+ years and going back, figuring out the messaging, figuring out who they're talking to, tightening that up so that they can grow and scale the way that they desire.
And hey, if you've been in business or even in corporate world, if you've been an adult for longer than 10 years, nothing stays the same. Nothing stays the same. There are new products, new services, new ways to do this, new technology. You have to go back. You have to go back and talk about all of those things, because if you don't, then you're going to be stuck and not be up at the times. You're going to lose business to attrition because of other people. And you can't sometimes just swap that strategy because it's different now. And so it's important to go back and take those steps every few years. And I like to look at, of course, marketing strategy annually, but sometimes it's difficult to do that as a small business person. You know what works, and it makes it hard to pivot in the right direction. And it's frustrating and it's scary. I think part of the time, do you think part of the time people are in fight or flight when they're in that confusion loop? Especially the ones that can't, like, I just keep learning and I just keep taking courses and you can't decide to move forward and choose to say, yes, I'm starting today. I spent, I swear, 10 years in functional freeze. I didn't realize I was in it until I was in grief counseling after the death of my mother. But I think that's part of that too.
Yeah.
So we're getting close to the end of time. Not end of time, end of our time together. And I want to talk about your challenge you're working on about empowering 1,000 women. Tell me about that.
You know, all of my best things come to me when I'm meditating. I was meditating one day and I just felt this number like popped up. And I was like, well, that's a pretty big number to start with, right? Kind of ambitious. But I met a space where I, for so long, did not have clarity, right? Like, was not sure about what I was supposed to be doing. And I was just kind of fumbling around in the dark, trying to figure it out, throwing spaghetti at the wall. And to get to a space where I finally feel clear, like I'm super clear about the type of woman that I desire to serve, right? And the type of impact that I desire to make. And so I set an ambitious goal, right? Like when the number came to me, I was like, well, that's a really big number. Like maybe we can start small and build. But I was like, no, like let's go big. So my goal is to support 1,000 women, right? And that's not only just through my coaching program, that's doing, events and conferences and working with women that way. But I believe, Debra,
I mean, you're making an impact here to my audience. It's really important for them to hear your story. And
thank you.
I don't think it's a big number, but we need to have big goals as women.
Exactly.
The future is female, friends. The future is female. Sorry for interrupting, but
no, that's what I was going to say. I think that was a perfect segue. I believe that each of us has a purpose and that looks different for each of us, but I believe that spirit entrusts something special to each of us. And my goal is to unearth, right, to help women to dig and to get to what that is and then to serve an impact at a high level. And so that's where that 1,000 comes from, because I think, wow, if I can support 1,000 women in launching a business, and even if they're not full time, it's something they want to do on the side, imagine the impact that makes in the world. There's research that shows that women, when we're successful, we're not greedy and just thinking about ourselves. Like we are reaching back and helping others and thinking about how we can create jobs, and like we uplift as we grow. And so I was just like, imagine the impact that we could have on the world if I support 1,000, they support 10 people, like that number just ripples and that people are doing good and feeling good in the world. And so that's where I am right now. We'll see how it goes.
I love that so much. I'm a big challenge mindset person. I was an athlete growing up. And so I put that goal out. I talked about when I transitioned as solo host that at some point, once I discovered I can do this, I got, after I had all the things happen, then I had to set that day because I needed that challenge mindset that's the goal. Now I'm going to get everything done before then. And I had to have the confidence to take that step, but that challenge mindset. So for me, it even challenges me when you say that I'm going to empower 1,000 women.
Yeah.
I love it. I love that.
Thank
It's
you.
a big goal and I think it's fantastic. I really do.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much.
And I love your story. It's so similar to mine in a lot of ways. And I have found just hosting this podcast and being a guest on other podcasts that it's a similar story for women around the world. I've spoken to women from Israel and Africa and Sweden and Switzerland and everywhere, Portugal. And a lot of us have a very similar story. And I find it so And
I think that we're all connected. You know what I mean? Like going back to that 1,000 women, I think that we are all connected. And so as I liberate a woman or support a woman in being liberated, then she supports someone else. And again, it just continues. And so it's not surprising to hear, that of course our journeys are different, but there's connecting points there and things that, we share in common in this human experience that we're having.
So we're really coming towards the end. How can people, and I'll have all of Dominiece's stuff in the show notes. You can find all of her stuff and she'll tell you what that is too. But I want to end with just some really actionable tips. So if somebody finds that they are in that confusion loop, and you hit all of us with the 13, we're all in there somewhere at some point in time, probably multiple places, depending on where we are in that phase of our business. But give us some like 3 just really good tips for breaking that cycle and making the decision to choose to find that clarity again, because that's the hard part sometimes, is just choosing to do it.
I think the first thing is, like we've talked about, taking a step back, like recognizing that you're kind of on the hamster wheel and you are trying all of these things and nothing is working. So pausing before creating any new content or investing in anything else and allowing yourself to take a step back to get that clarity. Now that can be you going through what I talked about with the discovery process and, the proof of validation and like doing your research that way, or working with a coach who is focused on the clarity piece and making sure that with whatever program you invest in, that is a foundational piece of the program. And then another thing is, a lot of the times we don't trust ourselves, right? So I talked about that with the overconsumer. We're looking for validation from folks externally. There's a level of trust that goes into this process because a lot of times when we've gone and been on this hamster wheel, it impacts our self-esteem. It impacts our confidence. We begin to question if we can do the thing. Am I enough to do this? And you are enough, right? You just need clarity. You just need someone to help you kind of come out of that place of darkness that you're in. So I would say pausing and doing the due diligence of really understanding yourself, who you are as a business owner. What are your best gifts, skills, talents? How can you put those into the business that you offer? And then again, going through the discovery process to get really clear on your ideal client so that you can literally, as you're posting on social or whatever sort of marketing that you're doing, I always say it's the equivalent of like having a megaphone. Once you get clarity, now you're talking specifically to that person very loudly, right? You're talking directly to their pain points as opposed to just throwing something out there and hoping that it lands.
Fantastic.
Thank you.
I hope all of you have gotten as much out of this episode as I have. I definitely can see myself in some of those archetypes. I think we kind of sink into one of them sometimes, and it's important to get that clarity. And so tell us real quick how they can find more information about your services and your story.
So the greatest place to start would be my website, which is domrclifton.com. And if you go there, there's a ton of free resources. So we didn't talk today about me being a somatic practitioner. And so I offer yoga, breathwork, meditation. So there's free resources there. I
love somatic yoga.
Thank you.
I discovered that when apparently for a couple of decades, when I'm anxious, I clench my butt cheeks doing somatic yoga. And now I can tell when I'm doing it. Right?
Yeah.
I'm like, okay, and I can relax. But it helped me realize that I'm really tight there and normal wasn't going to get rid of it, right? So anyway, I love that.
Start with the body. So there's free resources. If you're in that space of, stress, anxiety, overwhelm, start there with some free breathwork sessions. And then on my homepage, there is something called the Entrepreneurial Clarity Assessment. You'll see a button there that's going to take you to that quiz. It's a quick 3-minute quiz. It's yes or no questions. But what it does is that it identifies your most dominant archetype. So everything that we talked about today, you answer a few questions and it'll tell you this is where you're falling. And these are recommendations for how you begin to take action today to get out of that state. And so we've talked just generally about how you get out of a confusion loop. But if you're like, I really want to hone in, go ahead and take that quiz and it'll give you guidance on how you begin to come out of that space of fogginess and not having the clarity that you desire.
All right. You guys be sure and go check that out. Take her clarity quiz. And we're so grateful that you could join us and tell us all of your story and your expertise. I definitely learned a lot, and I know that my listeners did too. Please check out our show notes, and you can find out all of Dominiece's information there and links to our website at dealswithheels.com and my agency page, hexagonmedia.net. You can download my free ebook, 5 Steps to a Mindset for Success, from there as well. So until next time, everyone, we're out.